Jeff Pealrman, welcome to the Other 51. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no worries.
First of all, I know it's been, about 6 weeks since Gunslinger came out, since the book came out?
I think it's been 2 months. It came out October 25th,
okay.
So about 2 months.
Just out of curiosity, what was your record number of interviews a day when you were promoting it?
I mean, my all-time record came with my Walter Payton book, Sweetness, which was, I think, like 32.
Ooh.
And this was probably about 24, 25, so I didn't match the all-time mark. But there's always the next book, so you never know.
And so what's that like, doing 24 or 32 or all those interviews in one day?
Oh, man. It's mind-numbing. It's really mind-numbing. And it's one of those things you can't really complain about because you write a book, and I know so many people who they write books, and nobody cares, or the whole thing is getting attention for your book, and it's really hard. So I can't really complain. The beauty of sports when it comes to books is that you have this market of sports talk radio that just exists and will always, if you write a book about a topic that sort of is interesting or can draw viewers, you're always going to have at least an opportunity to talk about it. So it's boring, it's repetitive, it's you start trying to remember if you just told this story to the same guy that you're telling again. My kids mock me because they can tell the stories, and they'll start telling the stories just as I tell the stories. They really do. I mean, my kids have been I haven't already done that many in a couple of weeks, and they still will mock me with stories of Aaron Rodgers' helmet and stuff like that. So, but I can't complain because people are listening and people are buying it. So what's my, what's the BT alternative?
So is there a question that you were asked maybe in all 24 that one day, or like most common? What were you most commonly asked when you were talking about this book?
The number one question you get by far is so why'd you write the book? So why Brett Favre? Why Brett Favre? Why Brett Favre? And I have two different answers. I have the answer if they're really interested, and I have the answer if they're just asking it for the sake of asking it. Like I actually ended up writing the book because I wanted to do a USFL book. And it was the only way to get a deal was to I had to package it with Favre. So that's the unsexy way. Is I didn't really want to write a Brett Favre book, even though I ended up loving it.
Okay. So
if I have time and people are generally interested, I'll tell that story. And if not, I'll just say, well, Brett Favre, he's a legend, and enough time has passed. So I have two different answers to the same question.
So I am interested. I'm interested in the USFL book too, and I'm interested in the real stories. So if you want to, can you expand on that a little bit? What was was there anything more to that? Yeah, you want to write about the USFL, so you have to write about Brett Favre. And how did Brett Favre become that guy?
All right, so my dream book, sports-wise, for a long time has been the USFL. Just I grew up loving the league. There's so many stories, and it just kicks ass. Mm-hmm. But I had my agent. I wrote a proposal. My agent was never so positive about it, but he's a supportive guy, and he's a good agent. And he finally said to me, I kept bugging about the USFL, and he literally said to me one day, Jeff, nobody wants a fucking USFL book, right? And I was like, damn. So then I came up with the idea of packaging it with a bigger, broader idea. Mm-hmm. And I just thought Favre hit a lot of the criteria. I really did. I mean, big name, legendary player, huge following in Green Bay, enough time had probably passed since the annoyance of his retirement and unretired thing. So I wrote a proposal for Favre, got a couple of offers, and Houghton Mifflin was the only place that said they would do Favre and USFL. And the truth of the matter is, I really had to beg. I had to beg and really roll up my sleeves and say, look, I will do Favre for you for less money if you give me some money to do the USFL. So it's the only two-book deal I've ever had in my life. The USFL book money is terrible. But I just believe in this book so much.
So get one more question on the kind of interview thing. Was there something that you were never asked in all the interviews that you thought for sure you would be asked, or if you were interviewing the guy who wrote the Brett Favre book that you would ask? So what weren't you asked that you thought you would be?
I don't know. You do enough of these, you get pretty much asked everything. I mean, the thing. I always like talking more about the process than the guy.
Okay.
So anytime I do an interview like this where you're asked about actually stuff that's not, like like the last thing I want to talk about is Brett Favre's arm strength.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I never want to talk about that subject again, or the game against Oakland after his father died, which was definitely emotional and a great moment in NFL history. But it's more. I can't think of questions I wasn't asked. I can think of questions that I never want to be asked again.
Like what?
Like that.
Okay.
I never want to be asked about Brett Favre's arm strength. I never want to be asked about the Oakland game, because as interesting as those were, I don't write books. Like I write sports books because I have been sort of identified, pegged as a sports writer, and I do have a pretty good working knowledge of sports history. But I view the books as sort of like sports is like this prism, but it's really about these people and their backgrounds and their upbringings and how they got to this point and who they are. The last thing I'm truly interested in, I still don't know most of Brett Favre's statistics. Mm-hmm. It's not like off the top of my head I can tell you how many touchdown passes he had in any season. I'm interested in what made them. And that means, I could be writing a book about Brett Favre or Tupac or your mother, and it's not about the sports. It's about the development of a persona.
So, I mean, not wanting to do the Favre book, not like setting out to do the Favre book, in the process of reporting it and writing it, I mean, what got you to a point where that interested you most about Favre, that you could see the project through, or kind of became a hook for you into the project?
Well, when I did my Walter Payton book, I spent a lot of time in Mississippi, mm-hmm. and I came to really find the state itself really fascinating. I mean, there's obviously a long history of sort of a racial quagmire and desegregation in schools, and I almost saw it as part two of a really interesting thing. Like part one was Walter Payton, who came along as a young African American during the desegregation post Brown versus Board of Education. And here's part two, which is a white kid growing up after that, sort of in the 80s, not in the 60s and 70s. And it was almost like seeing the second step of something happen. Mm-hmm. And I really found that very interesting. I also found his complete and total status as a football non-entity, even through so much of his college career, really interesting. I mean, nobody knew about him. He was not a radar. He was not a map. He was just this kid who was handing off the ball in high school. So I do find that really interesting, because it doesn't happen anymore. There's no out of nowhere anymore. We have so many scouting services. We have scouts everywhere. We know about every kid, when he takes a piss in 7th grade. So I was really fascinated by sort of that kind of development, and also how it happened in such an interesting state to write about.
I mean, one of the things I loved about the book, aside from the phenomenal pseudo-echo reference that you dropped.
Thanks, man.
That was wonderful. I got down such a Spotify rat hole yesterday after I read that, and was just like, I remember them from back then, and there's not much on Spotify.
They were the best.
They introduced me to the keytar and Life Changing.
They also did a tremendous remake of Funky Town by Lip Sync.
So one of the things that I love, and this kind of gets to the USFL book, is I'm kind of fascinated with that era of sports, like late 70s and then into the 80s, kind of like through, I don't know, maybe 85, 86. And I was real little, so I was like 6 and 7 when the USFL was starting, so I don't have a lot of memories of it. But the more I read about that era, it seems like such a cool era in sports. It's like the beginnings of kind of what we have now, but it was still kind of I don't want to say old school, because that's cliche, but there just seems to be something very fun and a lot of times almost Animal Housey about that era. Do you get that feeling too when you look back at that time?
I do, because so much of it was unregulated. First of all, like everything you see now. Now, I'm not saying this is good for the players, but everything you read now, just as an example about concussions. Well, nobody was coming out for a concussion. Well, you read about PEDs. Well, everyone was taking PEDs. Like cocaine was used. You'd have guys walking around with toothpicks in their mouth during games, just because, like big gold chains while you were playing. I mean, look at early pictures of Michael Jordan with the Chicago Bulls. He's rocking a big fat gold chain during games. There's just something about that era. I agree with you, and maybe it's because I was a kid. I'm not that much older. USFL, I was 11, so it's not like I was some old sage watching the games. Right. It's just, there's something really magical about it to me, and it's like, I think about this a lot when I see ESPN or whoever, Fox Sports, pull out some statistic, right, where they'll be like, so-and-so is the first guy to complete for to run for 1,500 yards with 10 touchdowns and average more than 4.8 yards per carry since blah blah blah. And they'll name some guy from the 80s. And I always think like in the 80s they didn't even have these stats,
right?
So it's all nonsense. They didn't give a crap. Like it was just really fun, and it was like a way to make a living. And it was so like we've taken sports to this micro level that I find really annoying. I'm about afros, funky names, cool uniforms, like trash talking, and all that stuff was so 80s and so USFL.
Right. It was just like that time right before the money got really serious and really really big. So it does, I how much do you have to do this? Because I find myself having to do this too, having to kind of cut yourself off from being that old the old man who says, it was so much better back then when it was fun, and now it's just all corporate and money. And however true it might be, how much do you have to rein yourself in from being too much that guy?
No, because I don't really watch that much sports anymore.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like I am sitting in front of a TV whining about I don't know, whoever, Anthony Rizzo, and thinking, oh, this guy's no Mark Grace. Like I don't know. I don't care enough anymore. I'm a nostalgist at heart,
Mm-hmm. So what about the USFL? Why is that? What's the lure of that for you?
I mean, it's just so, everything seems bigger when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Santa Claus when you're a kid is this godlike creature, and then Santa Claus as an adult is the guy in the mall who's probably out on work release. So for me, it's kind of funny, but kind of true. But so when I think back to the USFL, I just remember being a kid and seeing Herschel Walker on the cover of Sports Illustrated wearing his New Jersey Generals uniform, and just thinking, oh my God. And I remember it was a specific issue. It was the preview issue for the first season, 1983 season. And you open up to the inside, and there's a spread with all these helmets, all the USFL helmets. And it was just like, oh man, this is so awesome. The colors, the designs, like the Michigan Panthers colors are plum and champagne. I mean,
that's amazing.
Wow, that is amazing. Then second year they do expansion, and they add these teams. I mean, give me three better team names than the Houston Gamblers, the Oklahoma Outlaws, and the San Antonio Gunslingers. Yeah. It's just badass, and they were robbing the NFL, and they were doing things you weren't supposed to do, and they were signing everybody, and it's such a joy. I don't know for all I know, I'll screw this book up. It's definitely a possibility because I'm so into it. But 2 days ago, I received a huge box in the mail, and it was from the former director of player personnel for the Chicago Blitz, and it was all of the old files he could find. And I'm digging through it, and I'm just like, I could not be a happier human being than sitting with this box and seeing all the letters from college coaches, like Division II college coaches saying, you really should take a look at our quarterback. Mm-hmm. Last year, he threw for 2,000 yards, and just everyone thought they were going to get a shot in the USFL. It was like hope. It was like football hope for the masses.
It's funny because when I grew up out near Buffalo, so the USFL to us was the place where Jim Kelly wanted to go instead of playing with the Bills for 3 years. But I really can't wait to read the book because I've heard Steve Young telling stories about his time with the was it the LA? Were they the LA Galaxy?
No, the LA Express. And let me just say one thing. About Jim Kelly that I love.
Okay.
So Jim Kelly is drafted, and he doesn't want to go to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He has no desire to go to Buffalo. But back then, there was no free agency. You had no other options. Blah blah blah. There was restricted free agency. You weren't going anywhere. And so he's resigned to go into Buffalo, and he's in the Bills' offices negotiating, and his agent gets because the Houston Gamblers find out that he's in the office of the Buffalo Bills, and the general manager of the Gamblers calls the Bills' offices and asks to speak to Jim Kelly's agent and says that it's a family emergency. We need to get him on the line. And the agent's like, hello? And it's like, the guy from the Gambler says, listen, this is Jerry Argovitz. Don't say anything, just listen. Leave the offices of the Bills right now. Fly to Houston. Whatever they're going to pay you, we will pay you significantly more. And that is how they got Jim Kelly. They literally called the Bills' offices and had him leave.
They literally stole him out from under. That's
They
fantastic.
stole him.
and just hearing some of the Steve Young stories, it sounds like I just love the notion that it was a pro sports league, but it was so like awesomely fly by night. Like they were really just winging it half the time. It's just so fun to hear those stories and to think about that time.
Oh yeah, and in 1984 they had two new owners. Well, they had a bunch of new owners, but two of them were Donald Trump with the New Jersey Generals and this guy Bill Oldenburg with the LA Express. And Trump had money, and this LA Express owner pretended he had money, and he gave Kelly this. It was a $40 million. It was announced as a $40 million contract.
Right.
But what it really was, as you saw in the thing, it was an annuity that he was getting $220 up front. Like he got a $1 million signing bonus, and he was making $220 annually. But he was going to get paid over the next 30 years. And all of a sudden, Steve Young is known as the $40 million man, and he's just this kid out of BYU driving around in like a 1975 like Chevy Impala. Like he doesn't. He's totally overwhelmed by it all. And then midway through that year, the guy runs out of money. And one of my favorite scenes is the final year of the USFL. The LA Express end up playing their home games at Pierce College, some community college, because they can't. They're drawing about 4,000 fans a game to a 90,000 seat stadium. And one of the final games is at Pierce College. It's the Outlaws and the Express, and it's Doug Williams as a quarterback of the Outlaws, the longtime Buccaneer, and Steve Young, and they meet at the center of the field after the game, which is basically a pitcher's mound shaved down. And Williams looks at Young and says, "What the hell are we doing here?" And that was the last game for both of them in the USFL.
Speaking of, are you going to be interviewing the president-elect for the book?
It's so funny. I hate to say, I really thought he was going to lose, and I kept waiting because I knew I wasn't going to get him during the election. I figured after he lost, so I feel like my odds are almost zero. I don't think the president of the United States, even a douche like him, is going to. I don't think he's going to take time out of his schedule to talk to USFL. It's not even a subject he likes. He hates that subject.
Right. And it's okay. I know from your social media feeds that we basically agree on about 90% of politics. So no offense.
Not a fan of the big guy.
No. So you interviewed, I think it was 537 people for the Favre book.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, I'm trying to remember getting the number right. How many are you going to be interviewing once you're done for the USFL book? Do you think?
Yeah, sadly not as many. My goal was 1,000, but I only had a year. I basically have a year to do the entire book, and usually I take 3 years, but because of the money, I just can't take 3 years. So I'm up to about, I would say, 415. It'll probably end around that because I'm writing it now.
So how do you keep all those interviews organized and all that stuff organized?
I actually end up printing out files. Everything is chronological and categorized, so I have folders for every team. Print out the interviews, print out the clips. I have this huge. I end up having the biggest library you can find for every subject. Like in my garage right now are mounds and mounds of Brett Favre files. And so it's the same thing with that. You just keep it chronological. And I have my Houston Gamblers folder, my Gunslingers folder. Then you'll have them in the folders by year, and it's a big pain in the ass.
And you have, if I remember from when we talked last time, you have a Word doc for each person that you're going to interview.
I do. Okay. I do. It's the only way I know how to do it.
Now, I'm curious from just a writing perspective, and not just interviews with USFL, but obviously you have the documents that you got from the Chicago Blitz and clips and books and stuff you've read. So how do you go about taking all this incredible amount of information and turning it into a narrative?
Man, it's hard. It's funny. I imagine somewhere there's some great authors. I don't know, whoever, David Moranis or Jonathan Ike, who are like super organized and know exactly what they're doing. But for me, it's a lot of like, oh yeah, this, remember that? Or I'm just gonna put this here. Like, it's more winging it than you would think.
Okay.
It really is. Like, all right, I'm writing on 1984 USFL. I'm gonna throw the Houston Gamblers in here, and then I'm just gonna try to transition to a different team. Which team should I transition to? I don't know. I haven't talked much about the Arizona Wranglers yet, so I'll do them a little bit. Okay. You just sort of and it's this is the weirdest book I've ever written because it's 3 years tightly packed. Like Favre's career, Favre's life, we're talking almost 50 years. So it's like a long leisurely stroll. And even the Cowboys book that I did, even like I wrote a book about the 86 Mets. It's one season, but it's kind of a stroll over 200 days. this is 3 years with like tons of stuff going on in this tightly packed 3-year period. So it's one of the more challenging sort of writing things I've had to do.
And I would imagine it's got to be a tough balance too, of balancing out like all like the major news events and the kind of tent poles of the USFL, along with all these awesome little stories that you're finding, right?
I would say yeah, but I also think you have to remember that like what was major news 30 years ago might not be so important now in hindsight. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm with myself. Yeah. So sorry, someone just kicked me out.
Oh no.
Yeah. So like if you do how to explain it? If you're doing like it's like okay, so the TV deal, the USFL TV deal a long time ago was a big deal. Right. Negotiations, blah blah blah. Who's going to televise the team? Blah blah blah. But now, at this point in time, who really gives a crap? You know, you just have to sort of ask yourself, what's important, what's not important, what's key, what's not key. Mm-hmm. Are the things that sort of got headlines back then, are they even that interesting now? And maybe the stories, you know, maybe making it a book of fun stories and funky anecdotes is more important than, you know, than sort of just adhering to the news narrative of 1984.
No, that makes sense. I always tell my students in my journalism classes, you know, I have a stupid name for it, but it seems to work. I call it the O'Cool test. Like if you are reporting something or interviewing somebody and they say something or you find something that makes you go, oh, that's cool, or kind of a holy shit moment, I tell them that needs to be in the story and it probably should be the lead, because if you think it's cool, then I think it's cool. And you know, that's much more important. It makes for a better story, I feel, than you know, the newsy thing that you feel like you should be reporting. So.
Yeah, I actually think that's very smart. I also think that like I think the worst thing you can do when you write these books or when you write anything is solicit a lot of opinion. Like I kind of like you just said, if it interests you, that's what's important. You know, like if you're fascinated by it, like you know, there are things that just I'm like, man, that is so cool, and I'll use it. And I don't go around asking a million people what they think. I don't. I want to entertain myself. My general belief is if I entertain myself, other people will be entertained.
And what entertained you in the Brett Favre book?
Well, I mean, I was fascinated by his rookie year in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. That's actually a classic example. Yeah. I read his autobiography, which was written in the mid-'90s, and he only devoted like 9 paragraphs to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, there has to be so much more here than that. And there really was. I mean, he spent the year drunk, fat, indifferent, third stringer, didn't care, coach hated him, showed up with alcohol in his breath. You know, so, you know, you take this tiny little year and all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's so much here. You know, to me, it's the most interesting year of his career, actually, his first year in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and then like, my other thing is I really do try to call everyone, mm-hmm. you know, and like, the classic example of how this works is I called a 10th round draft pick who never made the Falcons that year named Pete Lucas. He was an offensive lineman out of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And he basically started telling me how, like, he was sexually assaulted in a kind of Richie Incognito way mm-hmm. by members of the offensive line during training camp. And he was asked to, you know, stand naked and sing songs and, you know, do things naked that he would never ask of anyone. Mm-hmm. And the only way I found all this stuff, and I consider it a pretty important part of the narrative, is just by calling some 10th round draft pick and saying, hey, do you remember playing with Brett Favre? Mm-hmm. So I do always say, like, make the extra call. It's one of the important things you can do.
Right. Now, I remember when we talked a year ago, you were finishing the Favre book, but you couldn't say what you were writing on. You were just finishing a book, I remember you saying. And the USFL book, you've been very kind of open, like you're very open reporting on it on Twitter, on Facebook, on your blog, mm-hmm. talking about it. How much of a difference is there for you in the process, kind of reporting publicly like you are at the USFL versus Favre, where it was kind of more quiet?
Well, it's kind of liberating. The reason I'm doing it, honestly, is because I don't know if people buy a USFL book. Okay. So I figure, why not generate interest as I'm going along? You know, mm-hmm. Favre, I'm always paranoid someone else is going to do the book. Right. Or someone's going to take the idea, or maybe someone's working on one and they find out I'm working on one and then they rush to get it out before mine. But I don't see too many people writing a USFL book right now. Right. So, and like, it's one of those books, it's either going to sell 5 copies and vanish, or it's going to sell 100,000 copies and be like this, you know, shocking sports bestseller. You know, I just don't know. But I figure I can't hurt I think it's more likely to sell 5 copies. But I feel like I can't hurt myself by getting getting people involved in the process and sort of asking opinions, and not opinions how to write, but what do you think of this, or how about this guy, or who remembers this guy, or
Right.
showing pictures and old documents and stuff like that. It has brought a lot of it's actually given me a lot of oh, my uncle played in USFL. You want to talk to him? Or, oh, my brother was a season ticket holder for the Stars. You should talk to him. So it's actually been really good.
I was going to ask if kind of the nature of the subject where the USFL kind of finding guys would probably be not necessarily harder, but what kind of opens you up to more types of sources and more people who would be able to have a story to tell about it.
Oh yeah. Also, there were like a million people who either played or tried out for the league. Right. So you just keep calling, finding. Yeah, it's like it's a wide swath of people.
Why do you love? I'm always curious about this. Why do you love writing in coffee shops so much?
Because I like the illusion of social interaction. Well, it's true. I like having a little chatter and having sort of a background buzz, but and I hate just sitting by my refrigerator all alone in a cold house. So I've probably been to more coffee shops over the past decade than more different coffee shops than 99.9% of Americans.
Right.
I just also I like drinks. I don't know. I kind of enjoy the scene. It's like my scene.
Yeah. I tend to. I can't. Some days I'll work at home, but it drives me crazy. So I end up in libraries a lot. We have a couple of libraries around my house. I tend to like them. I don't know. It makes me feel. It must be the academic in me, but libraries.
Yeah, that's pretty good actually. I've written in libraries. I also like. So when we left New York 2 years ago, one thing I left behind that I love were diners. Diners are the best. I had a diner near my house in New Rochelle. I would sit there till 3 a.m. It was a 24-hour diner, and I love that place. I felt like, I just felt like I don't even know, like writers sitting in a bar back in the day. At 3 a.m. There's something about the diner scene that really did it for me. But Southern California doesn't have many diners.
I was gonna say there's nothing more underrated than a great diner.
Oh, it's funny though. The diner I worked in was a complete and total dump.
Okay.
It was gross. I once saw one time I was in the bathroom and was taking a piss, and I saw the busboy come in without gloves, take a paper towel, and rim the toilet, and then leave without washing his hands.
Oh. There's no great segue out of that one, so we'll just move on. What's the best thing you've read lately?
Best thing I've read?
Yeah.
Oh man, I recently read. It's old though. Washington Post did a story about the whole Newtown massacre. I think it ran in 2015, and it was about the families dealing with it, and that was really, really good and really powerful. I'm also I have a bunch of books on my nightstand right now at once. I am reading Marty Appel, who's a really good writer, has a Casey Stengel biography, and they sent me an advanced copy. It's really good. I love the Met years. He's a really good writer, so I'm reading that. But the problem with, the truth of the matter is, the problem with writing books all the time is you're always reading about subjects relating to your books.
Right.
So the most recent thing I read is a profile of Houston Gamblers wide receiver Gerald McNeil in the Shreveport Times. Is it the best thing I'll read this week? Probably not, but it's interesting to me.
Sure, and I've read, let's see, I read Gunslinger. It seems disingenuous to call that one of the best things I've read when I'm interviewing the author, but I did really, really enjoy it. I have no connection to Brett Favre other than he played football and I watched it, but it was really, really interesting. I liked it a lot. I also read a story this week. It was from the Globe and Mail, and it was about a woman who, in her 30s, lost her husband to cancer, like ridiculously fast, like 6 weeks from diagnosis till when he passed. And it was about her kind of, it's about what it's, the headline is what it's like to lose your spouse in your 30s. Just a gut wrenching, but it was one of those stories where you start reading it and like 45 minutes later, you realize you're still reading it.
I'll look that one up.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the notes for the episode. So,
that's cool.
So when do you expect to have the USFL book out?
Sadly, not until spring of 2018. It's going to take a while.
Okay. That's one of the weird things I've found. Like I've obviously never written a book, but even writing like for magazines or for like journals, the writing process, the publication takes so long after you've written it. I've always found that weird. Like it feels weird to have something come out and people read it. Like, I wrote that a year ago or something like that.
Yeah, I always think like when I see actors promoting movies, I always think, I kind of can understand how that is. Like you see Will Smith promoting Suicide Squad, and he hasn't touched the movie in a year and a half.
Right.
And now he's talking about how great of a time he had with Margot Robbie. And he probably doesn't even remember working with, meanwhile, you've worked on 2 more projects since then.
Right.
It's kind of similar. Like with the Favre book, when I was starting promotions, I said to my wife, I have to reread this book. Because I'm so into the USFL now, I barely remember this. So I picked it up and started skimming it over again and, making notes in the margins and stuff like that.
Brett Favre in the USFL, that would have been fun, wouldn't it have?
He would have been Jim Kelly, basically. Yeah, it would have been great.
Awesome. Jeff Pealrman, thanks so much for joining me today. This was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot.